My name is James Dearsley. I am the CEO of a climate tech business, an energy tech business out of the UK. But I have a sort of a real passion for trying to help people navigate where the built environment is going in regards to innovation, technology, and obviously the sustainability angle. I've got a sort of an opening piece here, which is looking really, I suppose, at the conference as a whole. And I was meant to have a 5-minute piece, which was going to be looking at sort of talking to you guys and thanking all the wonderful sponsors we have and all of the normal things that you'd expect an MC to talk about. But one of the things perhaps you don't see is the organization that goes into sort of looking at the speakers and trying to understand what the flow of a conference is going to be. For your benefit, obviously, to receive the information and the education. And what I started to understand was really where this conference is going is looking at 4 core themes. And the themes that they were looking at were as follows. So climate and decarbonization was the first theme. The second theme was well-being and livability. The third one, resilience and competition. And the fourth one was productivity, efficiency, and performance. So 4, I think, quite contrasting themes. And it was the first time I'd really seen that within a conference looking at innovation and technology. But it really was the foundation of some of the things that I've seen over the last 2 decades that I've been involved with the built environment and technology adoption. And as a consequence, what I thought I would do is I'd actually sort of merge my opening keynote speech with really the opening remarks of the conference per se. And part of that is because I've been on quite a journey. I've been a founder of several PropTech startups now, exited one of them, and also have been in the real estate industry for, circa 20 years. And I've seen all the challenges that, if any of you were here beforehand, Andy gave us an excellent speech about sort of change management and his experiences for Procore. And when my first business actually failed quite miserably, I learned a lot of lessons about the PropTech ecosystem. I had been pushing the PropTech ecosystem for years. I've been doing global keynote speeches, really trying to educate the traditional incumbent sector about what was happening. And it was frustrating me that things weren't moving fast enough. Genuinely, I couldn't believe that the real estate industry wasn't changing. And so I then made it my mission to understand why PropTech wasn't moving fast enough. And a lot of that was the fact that it was my belief that as an industry, we were looking at PropTech as this silver bullet to solve all of our challenges and changes. And as a consequence, I then went on a huge amount of research trying to understand what I saw as the bigger picture, which was a digital transformation journey. And as a consequence, when you look at the themes of this conference around that well-being, around the climate decarbonization, around the technology and innovation, around performance and efficiency and all of that side, it works perfectly into the research that I put together for the book that I was writing. So as a consequence, what I'm going to start with is hopefully give you a framework of understanding of what we are going to take away from the next couple of days. Because the panels and the keynotes that you're about to hear will be about everything, hopefully, that I will lay the foundation stones for you in the next sort of 15 minutes or so. So my speech here is entitled The Digital Transformation in the Real Estate Industry. And part of the challenge that I've seen, and I keep on coming back to this quote, it's often attributed to Mark Zuckerberg, but actually it's a gentleman by the name of Roy Amara, which is we overestimate change in the short term and we underestimate change in the long term. Now, Andy beforehand was talking about how wonderful AI is and how it's going to change the world and all this stuff. And last night I was debating with a friend of mine who's an agent here in Dubai, and having exactly the same conversation about how AI is wonderful and it's going to change everything. And you know what? It will. But genuinely, please, please, never, ever, ever forget the statement that we overestimate change in the short term and we underestimate change in the long term. Because for me, that is the cornerstone as to why PropTech, Contech, Cretech, Cortech, whatever you want to call it, has not had a significant impact over the last couple of decades within our sector. Because as a sector, we've gone through a whole mass of waves, what I call PropTech waves. Peak PropTech was 2017. There were over 2,000 PropTech businesses created in that time. PropTech investment peaked in 2019 and then fell off a cliff. I've seen PropTech VCs start and I've seen PropTech VCs shift, when they realised that PropTech was not moving fast enough. All of a sudden, they've become climate VCs. I've seen service providers who all of a sudden are PropTech marketing firms, are PropTech recruiters. We've gone through considerable waves of innovation and PropTech within the real estate environment. From the incumbents, I've seen heads of PropTech suddenly appear within real estate industry. I've seen heads of innovation when they realise it's not just about PropTech, it's about innovation. I've then seen companies, in Europe in particular, who've disbanded their entire innovation departments because they realise they shouldn't have an innovation department because innovation should run throughout the entire organisation, which, by the way, is probably not wrong. What I'm saying here is that as an industry, we are overestimating the change that this technology is going to have in the short term. And this is what I want to have a look at now. So, first and foremost, and we created this definition back in 2017, myself and Professor Andrew Baum, who is one of the first academic professors looking at the PropTech movement. And he was asked at his actual launch of his first academic paper into this movement what PropTech was. There was no actual definition for actually what it was. So that night, we scribbled on a piece of paper literally what that definition was. And I'm just going to recount it quickly. PropTech is one small part of the wider digital transformation of the real estate industry. One small part. Next. It describes a movement-driving mentality shift within the real estate industry and its consumers regarding technology-driven innovation in the data assembly, transacting, and design of buildings and cities. This is what we defined PropTech was back in 2017. The two key elements are the words digital transformation and mentality. So let's have an understanding here about digital transformation, because in reality, that is actually what the shift is actually happening. So, I mentioned about a book. I had to do the research and understand in its entirety what digital transformation actually was. Academically speaking, there are 18 different structural frameworks classifying and structuring digital transformation. In those academic frameworks, there are actually over 100 different considerations in terms of what makes up a digital transformation academic structure. The key element for us to learn in the real estate structure is of those 100 considerations, there are only 5 in all of those academic frameworks which are actually consistent. And these form the basis of what we looked at when we're trying to understand digital transformation within the real estate structure. So, customers, competition, data, technology, and values. And by the way, if you were here for Andy's talk before, you'd have actually recognized some of these terminologies were actually put in his presentation. These were the only considerations in all academic frameworks that were consistent to try and understand what digital transformation looked like. I then went on a mission to interview 50 leaders in 50 days. And when I say 50 leaders, I'm talking about 50 innovation leaders. These were heads of innovation. These were heads of PropTech. These were heads of technology. These were heads of IT. These were CIOs. These were CEOs of some of the largest real estate companies in the entire world. What makes you tick? How do you build an innovation culture? How do you look at your strategy in terms of understanding innovation and technology? These were the sorts of questions that we were interested in trying to understand and discover how you implement change. I was fascinated, and I'm not going to bore you with it because I haven't got enough time, but looking at businesses like JLL and trying to understand how their digital transformation journey goes was fascinating. JLL, anyone from JLL here? Just as well. Before I looked at JLL, I thought they were the absolute story of how a digital transformation journey should start. A CEO came in 2016, implemented massive change impacts. He did everything. It was almost like a management consultant came in, gave recommendations as to how to change a large global organization, and they implemented it. JLL Spark, JLL Tech, all of the things, create fighter brands, keep them off of the balance sheet of the core company, exploit and explore. Exploit your current business model, explore different ones. Fascinating. For me, it was a test case of where the real estate industry genuinely needs to move if we're going to instigate change, innovation, and technology. However, that was great when you get a management consultant telling you what to do at the start, but when you then look at how COVID has an impact on change, when you look at interest rates having an impact on change, which are real estate influencing factors, they then didn't change. So for me, JLL, keep an eye on how they work over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think they will be as successful as they have been in the past 10 years because digital transformation is a constantly evolving and changing thing. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. 50 leaders in 50 days. That was what I was trying to do. As a consequence of that, what we were looking at is a new model of digital transformation. We wanted to understand a model that was absolutely reflective of the challenges that the real estate industry had. And so when we looked at that, we said, well, actually, hang on a second. There are 10 considerations we need to think about. But equally importantly, there needs to be what we called or are calling drivers. There has to be a driver of change to implement true innovation and true technology. And this is what I'm going to take you on at the moment, because the drivers are really what are going to instigate a digital transformation journey. So, first elements here. To instigate true digital transformation within the real estate industry, we figured that there were what we call practical elements. Now, the 5 practical elements are data, technology, strategy, risk, failure, and competition. Now, why is that important? We're here about a PropTech conference. We are here, and still people do think that technology is the answer to everything. What you're looking at here is that technology is one element, one consideration to factor into this change movement that we have within the real estate industry. Now, I think what's really important here is when we look at this as an entire model, what we are going to be talking about is that data is actually the fundamental underpinning of everything that we do as an industry. It's also where we are completely the weakest as a sector. Now, I could go for hours talking about each one of these independently, but the real takeaway here is that technology is just one small part of the practical elements of digital transformation. Next, we have the people elements. The one theme that came out of this entire journey, and this has been researched now for over probably 3 years, the most important element of all of this change framework is this one word here. We have a fundamental disconnect of culture within the real estate environment. Again, I could go on for hours about why I feel that is the way, but I'm not. But just remember, culture in the real estate industry is fundamentally flawed. Let's talk about more positives. Let's talk about why we're now probably at the most exciting time when you consider change within the real estate environment. They're the drivers. So the drivers we've really put in because what we've understood is that the industry struggles with taking risk. We don't like to take risk. We like everything to be known. We like to understand our current business model. We like to work with that business model. We like to have an excuse in order to innovate and to change. So the first driver, there is a global problem about affordability. We have an affordability crisis. It doesn't matter if it's in residential. It doesn't matter if it's in commercial. There is an affordability crisis. I've seen this in London, in Lagos, in Los Angeles. It's all relative. An affordability crisis is giving real estate industry leaders an opportunity to change and actually question their current business model and look at instigating a movement. The next one, and this is why I'm bringing it into this conference, is there's this element around productivity. We talk about AI. I'm sure we've all used it. Why are we starting to suddenly see people investigating it and trying it? It's because the narrative is around productivity. The narrative is around efficiency. The narrative is around improving your workforce. So there is now a productivity driver within the real estate industry to finally instigate an element of change and take on some of those considerations that I talked about, practical and people. And the final one, which again is one of the themes of this conference, is around sustainability. Now, sustainability can be quite broad, by the way. We may have to factor this and really look at this being an ESG driver rather than just a sustainability driver. But again, this is all relative. When we first did our research, when you looked at some of the leaders that we were looking at from the US market, it was all sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. The legislative and governance structure was saying we have to change. Obviously, that's changed. With a new administration in, it has changed the agenda for the real estate industry to look at a sustainability driver to instigate change within the real estate sector. However, it's just a narrative shift because actually there's an element here of when you look at sustainability, you can also look at the economics of that as well. So there's still an economic argument around sustainability, which is still driving change within the real estate industry. But what you've got here is the foundation stones of creating a digital transformation environment of change within real estate. Now, almost my penultimate slide. This was a phrase from the 1980s. I like to use it to inspire some of the innovators in the room. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. That was an old saying in the 1980s. They were trusted, they were secure, people liked them, they understood them. And really, that was what it was all about. Are they stable? The argument nowadays is the fact that nobody's going to get fired for trying to be more sustainable, productive, and affordable. And that really is a driver that we're finding in real estate change. And that is one of the real key reasons for me to look at a digital transformation journey. But there's one final really, really important aspect in all of our learnings from all of the global leaders that we looked at within the real estate industry. And you have to not only have that framework of understanding of change. So yeah, technology is an element of it. Culture is another element of it. Values, vision, all of that stuff is fundamentally important to understanding change. It's not just about technology. But there's one more aspect which has to encase your digital transformation framework within our sector. And that is all about the alignment that you need within our industry. Unless you have alignment, and this is what I'm going to go through now, you cannot instigate your framework properly. So let me just work through what that actually means. The first element of alignment is you have to have money. I know it sounds a stupid thing to say, but unless you've got money in terms of venture capital investment, unless you've got, in particular within the climate setup, philanthropic money coming in, you will not have some form of alignment. The next element is in here. You have to have industry alignment, and that is probably one of the hardest. I'm not going to do it today, but one of my great joys when I'm emceeing is actually I generally start looking all suited and booted with a tie, and gradually, as every single speaker comes onto the stage, I actually take a piece of clothing off. And I end up wearing shorts and flip-flops. The first time I did that was actually in Bahrain. They didn't really enjoy it very much. But what I was trying to communicate was the fact that I was actually starting the day as an incumbent traditional sector in suit and tie, and I ended the day in shorts and flip-flops representing the startup community. My point was, the misalignment in the industry can be as subtle as clothing that you wear. That is where we have a problem of misalignment. There's no striptease today. So those are two areas of alignment that we have to have brought in. The next one is an academic alignment. We have to have academia in the room at these sorts of conversations. They are the ones that give us a framework of understanding of the deepest, darkest research that we need to learn and continue learning. And the final element that we have here is around government intervention. And it's really alignment between these four quadrants that genuinely give you the framework of change within the real estate digital transformation journey. And let me just give you an example. One of my big frustrations of working with conferences around the world is that when you have a panel, you generally have a certain sort. Now, that could be a gender sort. That could be an industry type. But what you have is you have a similar voice talking about similar things. Every single panel should have a member from the government, a member from industry, both sorts, a member from the academic and the money. Why? The academic person will say, well, my research suggests this. It's amazing. We should be doing that. The industry person can then say, yeah, okay, that would work. The money person would say, I wouldn't fund it, it's bullshit. You go back to the academic, this is my other bit of research. The industry says, that might not work. You go back to the academic, this is my bit of research. That will work, that will work. The government then comes in and says, we can build governance for that. We can build a legislative framework for that. With that alignment from all four parties, you're getting cross-contamination, you're getting curiosity, you're getting understanding from all different facets of a sector coming together. From there, you can create true digital transformative approaches. Now, I've only put this slide in purely because our first speaker is generally from a government element here in Dubai. So Dr. Mahmood is going to be joining us in a second. But what I will say, in all of the regions that I have, the GCC is far, far ahead when it comes to that alignment around the government and industry. Now, there are question marks some will have, but genuinely, when I look at South America, when I look at North America, when I look at Europe, there is a considerable misalignment in terms of accessibility and transparency of some elements of how, in particular, the data comes out of our sector for the industry to learn and evolve and improve upon. And as a consequence, to me, that is probably one of the foundation stones of misalignment, is when government is not coming into the conversation and progressing.